Hi there, and welcome to this week's episode of the Automotive Talent Show podcast, the podcast where we get to know and gain insights from leaders within the automotive industry. And today, I'm very excited to have a chat with my guest here today. My guest this week is currently working within the automotive space in a very different capacity than what you might think. And I think we could really benefit from their insights. Welcome to the podcast, Eleni Dracakis. How are you, Eleni?
I'm well, thanks, Cameron. Thanks so much for having me today.
Thanks very much for being a part of it. I think it's as I said in the intro. I think we're going to get a lot of great insights out of your background, because fair to say, and we'll go into this in a little bit right now. Fair to say, you come at the industry from a different angle, a different pathway from the stereotypical pathway, fair to say.
Absolutely. And I think, so my specialization is in leadership. And after the last few years of supporting and working with the leaders in the automotive industry, I think I can hand on my heart say that there is, the leaders in the automotive industry are very unique, and there's, no one quite like them outside of the industry. So I'm really excited about having this chat today.
Very good. Well, I suppose a great place to start is to do that high level, I suppose, overview and get an understanding of your background and your experience.
Yep.
So take us back to the start. So where did it all begin for you?
So back to the start. So I think, after I left school, I went through and did the traditional pathway to becoming a registered psychologist, which is actually quite a long pathway. It's about, 6 years and 3 degrees worth of study. And when we all go into it, we probably think there's only one type of psychologist, the psychologist that sits people down on the couch, like the one right behind you there. Yeah. And then partway through, I actually realized that there was another type or specialty in psychology called organizational psychology,
right.
Which was so I call it now, I label myself as a business psychologist because it's just a bit, easier to say, and I think makes a little bit more sense. But essentially the type of psychology that I do and the type of psychologist I am is a high performance psychologist. So I, really have had great opportunity to meet a lot of successful leaders over the time in different industries, as I mentioned earlier, to help them go from good to great.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's one of those things. I think when we connected and started having a chat, to be fair, just like you said there, call it naivety, you call it whatever. I was like, what is a business psychologist? Like what defines what a business psychologist does? So what could you go into that in a little bit more detail?
I absolutely can. So I think the main difference between a business psychologist and a clinical psychologist is I think a business psychologist really looks at the psychology of individuals, teams, and organizations, as opposed to in a clinical setting where it might be a little bit more remedial and someone has a problem they want to fix. Usually in the organizational or the business psychology space, we're more in the business of kind of helping kind of people who are neurotypical or really high performers and really want to use psychology and understanding of behavior to stretch themselves and take themselves to the next level and peak performance. So, obviously the car industry is a highly competitive industry and everyone is always looking to get that extra 1% or the edge. So I think that's how I came to kind of be connected in with the automotive industry in my career.
Right. Sounds very interesting. So is it, from what I take out of it, so it's obviously helping at the one-on-one level, but it's also helping at the higher level. It's looking at cultures, it's looking at the environments, it's looking at
absolutely
how everything intertwines with each other.
Absolutely, Cameron. So it's anything to do with the people and culture side of things in business and organizations. So from, recruitment to onboarding to one-on-one conversations, performance management, team building, employee engagement, culture, leadership development. Yeah, anything to do with that side of things.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think anyone in our industry knows that the automotive industry is although it's described as being the car industry, it's really the people industry. So
absolutely,
it is purely defined by the organic matter that put a name badge on and participate in it on a day-to-day basis. So Yeah, very, very interesting line of work that you're in.
It is. I really love it, and it's been great in the automotive industry because I think professionals in automotive have really experienced lots of different types of leadership in their time. So, as you
Yeah.
mentioned to me, you've got a long history in the automotive industry, and I'm sure, in previous generations, the style of leadership and the expectations are quite different to what some of us, say, millennials, have today when it comes to kind of performance and performance management and just general
Yeah,
performance in the workplace.
absolutely. I think that's a statement of the podcast. I think there's been a lot of fair to say there's been a lot of movement on that people space. I think
Absolutely.
you think back to the day that very dictatorized or direct type of leadership versus now. We've had to change. We've changed because we've had to. The industry has had to gravitate to keeping their people engaged. There's some organisations out there that run. They've got diversity programs. They've got equal opportunity employment opportunities, pay scaling. The whole thing I think, is really culminating to be the automotive industry being the best version of itself. Yeah, we just need to keep that momentum going, don't we?
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. And some of my professional background is in the diversity and inclusion space. So I've held roles in kind of energy and heavy industry companies in the past that have been purely focused on trying to engage and retain more women in senior leadership roles, and also looking at how we can drive more flexible work arrangements, through our workforces. So, as well as a mental health component, obviously, I talk about that quite a bit as a psychologist. I've really enjoyed, being able to meet the auto industry leaders where they're at and have some of these conversations in, profitability and financial based forums, and really helping the leaders and the dealer groups make the connection that when we don't just do this people stuff because it's nice to have, or we should do it, or we've got to be politically correct.
Yeah.
We do it because having a good grasp on it and having it in your leadership toolbox and artillery is actually going to, lead your dealership to better performance and to outperform your competitors and better customer experiences. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, it's a very, I think the industry, if you think back to, as we were talking before, you think back to the stereotypical old sales manager, service manager, dealer principal, whatever. I think they would probably put the stuff that we're talking about in the fluffy box. That's fluffy stuff. We don't need to focus on that. We just need to sell more cars, service more cars, yada, yada, yada. Where now, I think I was only reading something last week that said, irrespective of what job you're performing, if you've got high levels of emotional intelligence, you're pretty much guaranteed to be a successful person in that space. It's where, emotional intelligence was probably a word that 10 years ago, it was like, no one could even define probably what it was in the automotive industry.
Absolutely. And I think we really have come such a long way in understanding that having that empathy and that emotional intelligence in our toolbox is, what makes all the difference. And, leaders and men who have a strong understanding of emotions, that's actually going to give you the edge as a leader and as a high performer. If you can, use that information in the right way to get outcomes and keep everyone happy and engaged. So we talk a lot about in my dealer group sessions on how to, flex that empathy muscle and build more of that resilience and positivity through teams and conversations.
Yeah. So you're seeing in your line of work that's more, it's more mainstream thinking now. Like the uptake in it is more than what it's ever been.
Absolutely. And I think what really encourages me is just that we're talking about this stuff now. Whereas I think it just wouldn't have been on the kind of main serious topic of the agenda in the past. So I'm just really, really impressed because I think maybe in the past, a lot of leaders in the industry maybe never went and got formalized leadership training, and they just really learnt through trial and error, having some horrible dictator style bosses where they learned maybe what not to do. And
Yeah.
I'm just really impressed by, the get-go and the self-starting initiative in the leaders in the industry, and how a lot of the leaders have really sought out and self-educated themselves on a lot of these kind of emotional intelligence options, and have really tried to kind of bring them into their business and leadership style.
Yeah, that's awesome, isn't it? And I think, it's a lot like our customers. Our customers now are well educated because of the resources that they have available generally in their pocket.
Yeah.
And I think anyone in the world today has the same. If you want to know about any subject matter, irrespective of what it is, hey Google, it can work, can't it? So the more you want to know about it, the deeper you dive into it, the more you get to learn, and the more aware you are of different points of view when it comes to leadership and how do you manage people. And I think back to you think back to the back of the day. My father and my grandfather before him. Who taught my grandfather how to run a business? I can't answer that question. He learned it all through. I would suggest he learned it through trial and error. So, so when it came time to hand that business over to my father, who he passed that down, but you're still getting still a very narrow field of being mentored, isn't it? It's
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it's good to see that we can open the curtains up and look out the window, and there's a different world out there.
Definitely, definitely. But I think, as you said, something that I've noticed that's quite prevalent in the car industry is that family culture in dealerships. And I think, that's so important when a customer walks into the dealership to, feel like part of the family. So I suppose just, going off from what you were talking about customers, I have noticed, like, across many brands in the industry, that customer is really at the heart of everything. So we spend a lot of time talking about the connection between, the role of a leader is to make sure your employees are happy and productive. So if, as a leader, you are driving a good employee experience, then your employees and your team are in the best space to actually, provide that superior experience to your customers. So good leadership leads to good employee engagement and experience, and your customer experience, and your bottom line and profitability should all fall out of that quite seamlessly. And if you're doing all the right behaviors in the right way, you should, be able to month on month drive that consistency in performance as much as possible with the current conditions through the dealership.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a very stability breeds stability, doesn't it? That whole methodology. If the temperament of the leader of the business is stable and consistent, then that will drive that through all the way down through to the receptionist and yard hand. And everyone in between. It's
absolutely.
It's definitely an attribute that I've seen when you have a business like both of ours, where you're in multiple businesses, and you visit multiple environments on a daily basis. Human beings have a great ability to have perception and to pick up these attributes within these environments, don't we?
Absolutely. We're very instinctive. And again, that's what I'd say is a really, I think, good trait of a lot of leaders in the motor industry. I've found that they operate on their instincts, and they do build up that, what we call in psychology, educated gut feel. So over time and experience, you do learn through trial and error. And then, through the years, you do actually go on your instinct and your gut, and you just know the right behavior, the right response in the moment to drive that positive team culture. So yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. And we're talking, obviously, it is early July 2020. So whenever you're listening to this podcast, it is in a it's a very fluid time to be alive on the planet, necessarily in the automotive industry in Australia. How have you seen COVID affect the people side of the workplace in our industry from what you've seen in the last 4 months?
Look, I think the job was a real game changer in the industry. So I think, in those few weeks and days before the JobKeeper came in, I think there was a lot of panic. And I did have my customers call me and say, Eleni, I've never been in this situation before where I am potentially looking at having to get rid of really strong and high performance, people who have really backed me and a really strong part of the team. How do I make these announcements? How do I support my people? How do I do what's right for them? So I think there was just a lot of concern at that stage. There was a lot of stress at that stage. So my customers saying to me things like, oh, I look around me and my team and the other dealers that I'm talking to, they're just having one shot of coffee after the next. And this is the time when we really need to, try to be zen and relax and drink more water and just, be our best version of ourselves, because we've never encountered this kind of situation and we don't know which way to go. So I think obviously initially it was a really big concern for a lot of the leaders and the dealers in the industry around how to best look after their people, while also obviously keeping their business and their dealerships afloat and open at this point in time. I think once we got through that and we knew that JobKeeper was coming, I think actually what we've seen is that need to embrace flexible working arrangements, which I think is super positive. Some of my customers who operate the 7-day operations, say down in Sydney, I noticed they were doing things like actually closing on a Sunday, opening back up again on Monday and Tuesday, closing the dealership again on Wednesday and reopening Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And I know a variety of customers that I've spoken to have put in place various things for their workforce. So I think that's actually been a really positive thing. I don't know what you think about that and what you've heard, but are you seeing more examples of that flexible working come through this?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. I think it's the industry in a way has been an industry that has only changed when it's absolutely had to. That's been the car industry, right?
That's true.
And I think one of the things that I think we've really learnt out of COVID is that change necessarily isn't bad. Change is good. Let's challenge what we do and think about our business differently. And and there were thinking back to the time when there was that few weeks, as you say, when before JobKeeper was announced, there was a lot of change. There was a lot of uncertainty in the world. Businesses were thinking. I know some of my clients were saying, "We've planned to be closed for 3 months." That's what we were thinking back then, and then obviously JobKeeper kicked in, and it was a bit more programmed, a little bit more settled. But we've had to send we've sent people home. We've said, okay, Mr. Salesperson, work from home. When would we have thought that was something possible prior to this?
Absolutely. Like before COVID, I'd have dealer principals say to me, Eleni, you can only be a full-time salesperson. It doesn't work unless you're full-time. You've got to be at the dealership kind of at the ready to go whenever a customer walks in. And I think kind of COVID has really challenged that notion, hasn't it?
It is. And I can say I've spoken to a lot of clients. The last couple of weeks we've been able to get out and visit people again without a high level of anxiety that might have been in place before. And I've spoken to clients about, could you have your sales force working from home? And there are people there that have said, I think it's possible.
Absolutely.
There are also people there saying, I don't think it's possible. But I would say, for me, my viewpoint on it is probably similar to yours, where we're a performance-based environment.
Mm-hmm.
The car industry's always been about performance.
Yes.
And if you have a salesperson that turns up and punches the clock every day, and you're measuring him on performance or her on performance,
yep.
Or you have someone that works from home, manages their own time, manages their own appointment book, and is still managed on performance.
Yeah.
How is that different?
Exactly. Your high performer will always find a way,
Yeah.
and high performers thrive on challenges and situations exactly like this. So I think what
Yeah.
we've actually seen is the real cream of the crop kind of rising up through this kind of situation. And you kind of do, get to see people's level of resilience, how self-motivated they are, where some of these blockers are around motivation, how well people adapt to change, as you've mentioned.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's going to be really interesting to see off the back of this, which of the flexible work practices are the ones that kind of stick around, and where do they stick around, in which kind of businesses, brands, kind of tiers in the industry, versus which ones kind of fall off again. So that's something that I'm looking at very closely. I think another thing now that we're seeing in the financial year, and that really strong uptick in the instant asset write-off, just, so pleased that we've been able to find a silver lining to this cloud and this gloom. But I think really the next thing obviously is come 1st of October. What are things going to look like? And I think what we really need to do as an industry is, put our heads together and, get together at that peer, at that leadership level, and, manufacturers and dealers working together. So as an industry, we can really put a good plan of attack together for Q4 and the start of next year. Because, I know AADA was saying, I know we've had a good month or two, but it's still lower than, what was going on last year. And, you know what I mean? We can't get that false sense of security at the moment. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. But a lot of that result was, I think from memory, was 6.4% down. So if you'd said back in March that we'd be only 6.4% down in June, you would sign that off, wouldn't you? You would say, well, I'll take that, considering the world is coming to an end.
Absolutely.
But yeah, you're right. Like, it is and that 6.4% result, I could say, is being done a lot more efficiently than what the result from last June was performed. I've had chats with some dealer principals that are running their businesses on like 30% less staff in the sales side. So
absolutely. And I think that is the mantra of some of the, the big guns out there in the industry. They'll say in their advice is, that bottom 30%, if you don't have to have them there, like, I know that's really harsh to say, but in these kind of conditions, if you're going to survive and thrive, you've got to make some of those cutthroat decisions. And if people aren't on the bus, like, everyone's got to be on the bus and everyone's got to be pulling their weight. And, we've all had to turn into lean, mean fighting machines in our businesses and the way we run things in order to survive and thrive.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that you've probably seen as well, is that from my what I've seen in the last few months, is how an organisation has coped with the challenge.
Crisis. Yeah.
Has either cemented their brand to their people, or has done the complete opposite. Have you seen the same thing?
Absolutely. And I think, the main thing that comes to mind to me when you just said that then is leaders and organizations who are taking decisive action. So, even if in the end it isn't the best option or direction, as a leader, you have to be decisive and commit to action as a result of whatever's coming at you out there. So yeah, I personally think that the kind of the bodies that were able to kind of take stock of the situation and make some hard, fast kind of rules for governing how people were going to make, especially people decisions at this time, I think they've been the ones that have come out of this quite well on the other side from what I'm seeing.
Yeah, I believe so too. I think, and to the point where I've actually heard anecdotally that passed on to the customer.
Yes.
So as the story goes, the organisation said, okay, this is the challenge, this is what we're going to do, and stayed true to that course. And a customer heard about the brand loyalty that was generated from that. And he was a business manager in a dealership in Sydney, and said, my company has done this for us. And that customer said, How good is that? This I've given this organisation my business, and that's just said to me that that was the right decision that I've made through purchasing a vehicle from this business. It's it's transcended the people that have employee numbers.
Absolutely. And I think that, that social responsibility and that ethical leadership, and just people really look to leaders and brands and, companies now. They look to leaders, like even in place of political leaders and, government leaders now. And they
Absolutely.
really look at, what does this company or what does this person stand for? And do I want to buy into this type thing? So, and I know that can be a very kind of confronting conversation to have, say, especially in an industry like the motor industry, which could have in the past been very commercially driven. When you actually see some of the drivers of what drives kind of consumer sentiment and customer buying behavior, they're actually things like corporate social responsibility, the employee engagement, some of those kind of traditional fluffier metrics that actually have quite a big impact on customers' buying behavior. So that's interesting that you're seeing that in practice.
Yeah. It's I think inevitably, irrespective of the size of the business or the industry you're in, people, the old analogy still rings true, doesn't it? People do business with people. People work for people. It is all a 2 feet and a heartbeat business when it comes to our world, definitely.
Absolutely, it's all about people.
It's all about the people. Yeah. What in your opinion, from what you've seen, what makes an environment great nowadays? Like what really, thinking about, what does the ideal sort of culture of a business look like for you in our world?
Look, I think, as you said, it's got to be a work hard, play hard culture. So this industry is performance based, and I think you never want to take that away. So I really believe in that culture of high performance, but with the lens of ethical and values placed over the top of it, right? So yes, we've all got to be here to work hard and get results, but we want to make sure that everyone is aligned in the way we go about getting those outcomes, our behaviors, and what we believe in. So I'm sure you've seen, quite a difference as well over the years in terms of the way people recruit, and probably more emphasis now on cultural and motivational fit. As opposed to in the past, maybe where it was just like, has this person been a salesperson before? Have they got a good track record?
Yeah.
Sometimes actually we don't want that now. We want to take a blank slate and be able to mold that slate into the way that we do things around here type thing. So I think that cultural element and that high performance element, is a perfect fit for the car industry.
Yeah, it's definitely changing, isn't it? Like you look at, and there's things that are actually changing that I think will continue to drive that change. So you look at, say, for example, you look at Honda. Honda are going down that agency model, which basically means that the price of a car is immaterial. You can negotiate on that trade-in price perhaps, but if you buy that vehicle there or there or there, it's going to be the same car, same price, irrespective. So a lot of the time that a customer spends in our world is that back and forth, isn't it? And I think when it comes to relationship building, transparency is always key. You have relationships and you have a connection with someone that is trust through transparency. And I think one of the biggest factors for a consumer is that, right now when they go and they go to, the standard metric is that a customer will visit 2.3 dealerships. So a customer thinks, why when I ask for the same car with the same specification, I get 3 different prices?
Yep.
And that doesn't build that trust and connection. So
and I think it's very confusing. Before you start working in the industry, you don't understand how it works. So, to me, when I really started getting into things and I just understood the landscape in terms of stakeholders, and the whole manufacturer and the dealership kind of thing. One senior leader said to me, goes, Eleni, we all want the same outcomes. We just fight over who pays for different things.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, that's so true, really, so I think in this industry, it's always that balancing act, isn't it? Like just the way you report things, the way you work together on outcomes, the way you understand, the customer understands things and warranties and all that stuff. It's just a very actually complex stakeholder environment. And I think there are a lot of demands on leaders in the industry. And it is actually, and then you put all the government stuff all over the top of it and finance, it's actually a very complex business.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Now in a very unstable kind of economy as well. So it ain't for the faint-hearted, that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. But, I think coming back to what we were talking about before, if in a world where price isn't a part of the discussion and it becomes about the relationship, for me, the way I think about it is if you're a business leader and you're driving strong relationships with your people, then that attribute will drive a strong relationship with your external person that visits your business to have custom with you. So it's the relationship and the connection to your people has never been more important, I don't feel, in our world.
Absolutely. I second that.
Oh, good. I told you we were on the same one.
Definitely.
And what do you think the car industry or a stereotypical dealership in 20 years from now, how good's the reception of your crystal ball? Like, can you from what you've seen, from your insight, what would you say that would look like, that picture? Would it be the same as now, or would it be different?
I think it's going to be same but different. So I think, people are always going to be at the heart of things, but I think the way we do our business is going to look very differently. So, there's a lot of disruption, technology, as you said, the models in which some of the brands are moving towards is going to impact things. But I think, we've got actually a very traditional customer base here in Australia. So I think that's going to be really interesting around the mix of vehicles that someone is going to be driving in the future. The government's quite conservative in some ways around, bringing in new things. So I think that people and that trust and that transparency in the relationship, it's still very much going to be at the heart of things. No matter how it looks in the future, I think if the industry can keep it all about the people, I think that's going to be a very kind of strong foundation.
I believe you're right there too. For me, I think from previous experience, I think will the automotive industry transition in the next 20 years to be 100% online? I don't feel that will happen. I know the tried and true cliche is that when someone purchases a car, it's the second biggest purchase they'll ever make. And I suppose in today's market, it could be the biggest purchase they ever make. Like, young people getting into the housing market these days. But I think people will always want to touch and feel and take that. They want someone to be a part of the process to, I suppose, reinforce their decision that they're making is the right one, rather than jumping on toyota.com.au and ordering a Prado and getting it delivered on this day, without any human involvement at all.
That's it. Look, I think technology is great. It gives us a lot of options, but I think at the end of the day, we're humans and we all want connection. So we want that opportunity to buy into the dealership family. We want that opportunity to buy into the brand. I think things like subscription-based models and having the opportunity to get to know the brand better through multiple products, I think that's very exciting myself as a millennial. But I think, hasn't it been quite cool through COVID that all of a sudden we're not jumping on planes anymore? We're getting back into our cars and going on road trips. So, yeah. I think that's great.
Yeah, bring back the good old family weekend road trip like we were when we were kids, isn't it? That.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Good for everyone to kind of, back Australian made and, just get back into all the beauty of our country and what we've got to offer here. And, Cameron, I remember I was working at a global consultancy at the time when kind of manufacturing of cars was finishing up in Australia, and we were doing a lot of the outplacement at that time. And I'm really interested to see now with everything that's going on in the world, is there a possibility to bring things back more locally to making vehicles here? What do you think of that? Do you think that's ever going to happen?
I think we will be. I think we'll be less reliant on. Importing. I think.
Yeah.
The. I think that right now there's a great opportunity. Like you look at the way vehicles are these days. They're not just a combustion engine wrapped in metal. There's so much technology in them now. You look at your brands like your Teslas. There's a lot of boutique hybrid brands popping up all over the world, whatever demographic they're in, whether it's a truck or a pickup or regular mainstream passenger cars. I think Australia has such a strong manufacturing history and ability, and there is no reason why that we couldn't pop up a hybrid brand, for example, or an electric brand. The technology is readily available. We've definitely got the smarts to do it. I'm thinking that it would be great if the government kicked in and said, let's get Broadmeadows up and running again, or let's get Elizabeth at South Australia up and running again. We've got these great facilities. There's no reason why we sort of can't use them in a way, and the skill set that we've developed over the last 80 years.
Exactly.
I think we've got to get through COVID first, maybe.
Exactly. We do have to get through COVID. But I think, it's brought up that everything's in the mix, and, we've got to look at everything really. Absolutely, now to survive and thrive into the future. So, yeah, it's going to be very interesting times, isn't it? Even in 3 months' time, 6 months' time, 9 months' time, 1 year from now. Yep,
absolutely. I think, and like the mental health part of it, like it's one of those things that you can't. Mental health, I think one of the great things, as we said, I think prior to we jumping on to this discussion, is that it's a topic that back in the day wasn't discussed. It was a shame. There was a stigma attached to it, where nowadays it is something that people are prepared to talk about and be more vulnerable about. And I see that as only being a absolute good thing.
Me too. I'm just so proud of the leaders and the men in the industry for, being brave enough to kind of go there, and just the support and care that I hear the leaders have for their people, them telling me stories about, what their team are going through and how they really want to try to support them in the best way possible. And, in practical ways, and, trying to self-educate themselves more, understanding pathways of referral, and just, as you said, bringing it out into the open, I think is just the single most, biggest positive thing. And I think, you're saying this is a people industry. And I think at times like this, we need connection, and we need to continue to look for all these positive points of connections. And if we have to do it in an alternative way, we have to, but we can't stop connecting just because the face-to-face people option isn't always there. Because, now is a time when we need to put our heads together more than ever for mental health, but also for the innovative solutions. So as an industry, we can be best placed moving forward.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And in an industry that has been, yes, it's different nowadays, but it has been in the past. It has been a very masculine orientated industry, and discussing it has always been that it's been a taboo subject, hasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think one of the great byproducts of the last few years is the more openness and more vulnerability that people are prepared to display in a public setting.
Absolutely. And actually that recognition that being vulnerable, being self-aware, and that emotional intelligence is actually such a critical component of leadership and high performance. Yeah. So you got to embrace it to be able to kind of, unlock that extra 1% and really get through these times.
Absolutely. It's a great message to keep broadcasting out there.
I think so. It's been good to talk about it today.
Absolutely. I've really appreciated your time, Eleni. So I always give the person I'm chatting to a bit of an opportunity to put themselves out there. Obviously, there's a lot of we've covered off a lot, and you've got a lot of value to add to, I think, a lot of organisations out there. So, how do people get in touch with you if they'd like to continue a conversation with you on anything that you can bring?
Yeah, so you can find out more about me through my website. So I really put quite a bit of time and effort into personalizing my website so that if someone goes on there, they can really, find out a little bit more about me and the types of services I offer. And I've really worked hard in the past year or so in terms of building my personal brand and professional image. So, you can find me on LinkedIn, you can find me on Instagram, you can find me on Facebook, and I'm just self-titled. So it's elenidracakis.co, which is my website. And I'm under my name on all the socials. So I'm sure you'll pop that, if you could just pop that on in the bottom of the link or something like that. So
I will do.
It's easy for people.
I can concur. The website is very good. We'll put a link to the website in the show notes so that people can get in touch with you very, very directly. It's a very good website.
Thank you. And I'm really pleased to see so many dealer principals and leaders in the industry hanging out on LinkedIn and social media, and also trying to drive that, the digital footprint of their dealerships, not only in the traditional kind of advertising way, but just now more organically in terms of showing more of that culture out there online. So I think that's another thing. That's a whole other topic in and of itself for another day.
Well, we can. There's no rule about guests only appearing once, Eleni. So more than happy to have you back and talk about that sort of thing. But I agree with you. I think there's a bit of a movement out there. I think I think part of the byproduct of COVID is that I think maybe at the start we've felt like we're in a rowboat and we're in the ocean and we're bobbing up and down and we're the only person in that rowboat. But I think we've figured out that there's a lot of people in that same rowboat. And with everyone chipping in, then we will get to that island paradise and live happily ever after.
We will, and probably even better than we ever thought we could thrive as well and survive through this. So
yeah.
Whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right?
Absolutely. I don't know but you look back to the previous challenges, and obviously COVID is a unique one. But you look back to the GFC, to GST coming in. Everyone thought the world would come to an end. You look back to all of these significant milestones that we've said, this is a big challenge. We've actually come out the other end way better than what we went into it. And I believe that COVID is going to be no exception to that.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think we're in a really resilient, we have a lot of resilient people in this industry. And
absolutely.
I think it is going to really, it's really going to separate the different players. I think this kind of, situation, doesn't it? It really, shows what people are made of. So
absolutely.
Thank you so much for having me. And love to come back at any time to have another chat. It's been great, Cameron. Thank you.
Appreciate your time too, Eleni. Thank you very much for participating.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.